This feels like one of those moments where the NASCAR world just stops for a second and says, wait, what just happened? Because today we've got not one, but two major stories involving the same driver, and together they paint a picture that honestly has a lot of fans talking right now. One of these stories reveals just how serious a terrifying moment from last weekend really was. The other raises a huge question about toughness, determination, and what happens next as the season keeps getting more intense. And the crazy part is that when you put these two developments side by side, you start to realize that what looked like just another racing incident may actually be much bigger than any of us initially thought. This is one of those situations that reminds you how brutal this sport can be, how quickly everything can change, and why NASCAR fans never take a driver's safety for granted. There are a lot of details that have come out over the last few days, including information from NASCAR officials themselves, and some of it is honestly pretty shocking. So stick around because we're going to break down both stories, explain what they mean for the season moving forward, and talk about why fans across the garage are paying such close attention right now. And before we jump in, if you're enjoying the coverage here on NASCAR Nation Report, make sure to hit that like button and consider subscribing. We're still a new channel and we're chasing our goal of 15,000 subscribers. It would be awesome to have you join this community early and be part of building something special with fellow NASCAR fans from the very beginning. Let's get into the first story because the more details that come out about Christopher Bell's crash at Michigan International Speedway, the more unbelievable it becomes. What fans saw during the Firekeepers Casino 400 already looked terrifying in real time. On lap 148, Christopher Bell was racing alongside Chase Elliott when Elliott's number 9 Chevrolet got loose underneath Bell on a restart. The contact sent Bell's number 20 Toyota shooting toward the outside wall in turn 4, creating one of the most violent impacts we've seen in recent years. Now NASCAR has officially confirmed what many fans suspected immediately after watching the replay. According to NASCAR Vice President of Racing Communications Mike Ford, during the latest edition of Hauler Talk, NASCAR safety officials determined that Bell's impact was the hardest hit recorded during the entire next-gen era. Think about that for a second. The next-gen car was introduced in 2022. Since then, we've seen some massive crashes across superspeedways, intermediates, road courses, and short tracks. Yet NASCAR's data shows that Bell's impact was the most severe hit they've measured since the current generation of Cup Series car debuted, and it goes even further than that. Mike Ford explained that Matt Harper, the managing director of safety systems at the NASCAR Research and Development Center, called it the hardest impact he has personally evaluated since joining NASCAR in 2015. That's more than a decade of crash data, more than a decade of incidents, more than a decade of studying some of the biggest wrecks in modern NASCAR. And according to Harper, this was the hardest hit he has seen from a data standpoint. Honestly, as a fan, that's a pretty chilling statement. We all knew Bell hit hard. The replay looked brutal. The sound of the impact was brutal. The damage to the car was obvious. But hearing NASCAR officials confirm that this wasn't just another hard crash, that it was the hardest impact of the next-gen era, puts everything into a completely different perspective. Ford also revealed that one of NASCAR's primary measurements when evaluating crash severity is something called Delta V, which measures how much speed is lost during an impact. NASCAR is not releasing Bell's Delta V number publicly. The organization considers that information a priority and keeps it private. However, Bell or Joe Gibbs Racing could choose to release the data if they wanted to. So far, neither Bell nor Joe Gibbs Racing has done that. What they have confirmed is that Bell suffered a fractured left wrist as a result of the accident. Another important detail that shouldn't be overlooked is how seriously NASCAR investigated the crash afterward. Bell's number 20 Toyota was first evaluated in the garage immediately after the accident. Officials conducted visual inspections, photographed the vehicle, and downloaded information from the incident data recorder. The car was then transported back to Joe Gibbs Racing's facility in Huntersville, North Carolina, where NASCAR continued its evaluation. Matt Harper reportedly began reviewing the photos and crash data within minutes of receiving them from Michigan. One area that received particular attention was Bell's restraint system. According to Ford, NASCAR focused heavily on how those safety components performed because they were absolutely critical in an impact of this magnitude. And here's another detail that really shows how violent the crash was. The impact damaged the safer barrier itself. The wall required repairs that led to a red flag period lasting approximately 20 minutes while track workers repaired the barrier before racing could continue. That almost never happens unless the force involved is extremely significant. Now let's move to the second story because somehow it makes this entire situation even more remarkable. Despite suffering a fractured left wrist in what NASCAR now says was the hardest hit of the next-gen era, Christopher Bell is still going racing this weekend. Joe Gibbs Racing has officially confirmed that Bell has been medically cleared to compete in Sunday's NASCAR Cup Series race at Pocono Raceway. After the Michigan race, Bell underwent further medical evaluation back home in North Carolina. X-rays confirmed the fracture in his left wrist. For a brief moment, I think a lot of fans wondered whether Joe Gibbs Racing would need to find a replacement driver. But Bell had other plans. Doctors cleared him to race, and Bell will remain behind the wheel of the number 20 Toyota as he continues his championship campaign. And honestly, this says a lot about Christopher Bell. Now, nobody is pretending this will be easy. Pocono Raceway is not exactly a place where drivers can relax and nurse an injury. The track's unique triangle layout demands constant adjustments, heavy steering input, and tremendous concentration throughout an entire race. Even healthy drivers talk about how physically demanding Pocono can be, so competing with a fractured wrist is going to be a serious test. At the same time, Bell knows what's at stake. He's one of the strongest championship contenders in the NASCAR Cup Series this season. The Michigan crash already hurt him in the standings because the accident resulted in a DNF at a critical point of the year. Every race matters, every playoff point matters, every opportunity to build momentum matters, and Bell clearly doesn't want to surrender any ground if he can avoid it. What makes this story so fascinating is the contrast between the two headlines. On one hand, NASCAR officials are telling us this was the hardest impact of the entire next-gen era. On the other hand, Christopher Bell is preparing to climb right back into the race car only days later. That's a credit to Bell's toughness, but it's also a credit to how far NASCAR safety has evolved. Think about it. Years ago, a crash of this magnitude could have resulted in far more serious consequences. Today, Bell walked away from one of the hardest impacts modern NASCAR has recorded. Yes, he suffered a fractured wrist, which is certainly significant, but he is still healthy enough to continue competing for a championship. That's exactly what all the investments in safety systems, seat technology, restraint systems, chassis design, and safer barriers are intended to accomplish. As fans, we sometimes get caught up in playoff battles, rivalries, wins, and controversies, but moments like this remind us that driver safety remains one of the most important stories in the entire sport. Looking ahead to Pocono, all eyes are going to be on Christopher Bell. Fans will be watching to see whether the wrist affects his performance. We'll be watching to see how comfortable he looks inside the car, and we'll be watching to see whether he can bounce back immediately after one of the most violent crashes NASCAR has seen in years. Because if Bell can overcome this setback and remain a serious championship threat, it could become one of the toughest and most impressive stretches of his season. At the end of the day, these two stories tell us everything we need to know about where NASCAR is right now. The sport remains incredibly fast, incredibly demanding, and sometimes incredibly dangerous. Christopher Bell just endured the hardest recorded impact of the next-gen era. Days later, he's preparing to race again. That's remarkable, and it's exactly why NASCAR drivers continue to earn so much respect from fans every single week. Now, I want to hear from you. Were you surprised to learn Bell's Michigan crash was officially the hardest hit of the next-gen era? And how do you think Christopher Bell will perform at Pocono while dealing with a fractured wrist? Drop your thoughts in the comments below because I know NASCAR fans are going to have a lot to say about this one. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to NASCAR Nation Report, and join us as we continue pushing toward our goal of 15,000 subscribers. This channel is still growing, and if you love daily NASCAR news, honest fan discussions, and real conversations about the sport we all love, we'd love to have you here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.